Well, hello everybody, and today we are finally going to be planting up our wooden boxes. So make sure that whatever ones you guys decided to use, that you've got them in place and ready to go so we can work on this project together. But before I get started with each step, I want to give a shout out because we've got a guest on our set today. Stuart's mom, Susu, is here, and she is kind of keeping us honest, I guess. She's giving us moral support. So Stuart and I were trying to decide what to call this segment, and I guess we could call it Microgreens in Boxes. We could call them Easter boxes because Easter is April 4th. Whatever you want to call it, we're going to be planting some greens, some grasses, and maybe a few other little goodies in these wooden boxes. So get your stuff ready. What do you need? Well, number one, you want to get some seed starting mix. Now, I bought this just at my home improvement store. You could get it at your nursery. One thing that's important, this comes in a plastic bag, you guys, and what I did was just open it, and then since the bag is plastic, I just watered it so I could hydrate it and get it really moist before I put it in the container, because this is very powdery. It can kind of fly all over the place. It's got a lot of peat moss in it before you put it in the pot, and so that kind of just makes things a little bit easier and a little less messy. Okay, then obviously you're going to have your containers. So this is a wooden box, and I like the fact that all of these are the same light wood. But this is a wooden box. It actually came from Garden Gate magazine. I got some Christmas ornaments in it, and I saved it to use for just this purpose. Somebody out there, and if it was you, let me know. I showed this in my video about a selection of boxes that we might press into use for this. And someone told me that this made in Texas box actually held a pumpkin pie, and that made me remember. Yes, it did. It came with a pumpkin pie, just a really ingenious way to send a gift. And since I'm so simpatico with all of you guys in Texas right now who are still probably suffering from the winter storm, I want to do this as a little nod to you guys. And then lastly, I've got a large one. And this too was a gift box, and it contained, it's from Olive and Cocoa, and it contained a whole assortment of olive oils and fun things like that. So I've got all of these ready to go. I've also got a couple of fun containers that I'm going to be potting up. This is a thrift store basket, and I have got a compressed peat liner in it. I might even sow a few seeds in these little, what are these called? The little pint containers that you can get at the grocery store. These actually I got at Michael's, so I might be potting up some of those too. So then obviously, in addition to your potting mix and your containers, some of the things I'm going to be using to seed them is, I talked about perennial ryegrass. I actually had a little bit of a hard time finding this because I didn't want to buy it in huge quantities. Unbelievably, I got this. This bag was all of $10. I can use it for lots of different projects. I can share it with friends. I got this at the Dollar General store yesterday. And this is what I'm going to do with it. This is kind of an inspiration pick. I think that's so fun. So I'm going to try to replicate that look with some of my grass seed. Yes, I have my color coordinated LaCroix drink with me in case I get thirsty. Another option to this bag seed starting mix is this compressed coir. I just discovered this the other day. It is a burpee seed starting mix. You just hydrate it by putting it in a bucket. What I love about it, and you know, you always learn something new in gardening. I had not heard of this before. I guess it's been around for a while, but this was just like, oh gosh, it was just $2.47, I think. This makes 8 quarts, whereas an equivalent bag of 8 quarts was about $4.50. So almost for half the price, you can get it in this really compressed form that takes up less room, uses less packaging, and I've heard even performs much better than something like this. So this is an opportunity for me to try that. Then of course I've got my seeds, and I've got a selection of both herbs, grasses, all sorts of different things. I've got some microgreens here. This is a really popular way to grow microgreens. I've got some cilantro, some catgrass. A number of you told me that you were going to use catgrass. I've got some radishes. I've got some lettuces. I've got all sorts. I'll do an assemblage and I'll put a screenshot this up so you can see my assortment of seeds that I'm using. And all of these, some of them I'm going to use solo, some of them I'm going to mix together, but it should be really fun. And then lastly, I just have some water so I can water them all in after I'm finished. Oh, one last thing. If your boxes don't have drainage, you want to make sure that you've got a drill on hand so we can drill holes in the bottom. Okay, so now let's get started. Okay, I just have to share. I'm sorry, Stuart, but you give me grief so often that I have to throw some of it back at you. I was telling Stuart that our next step is to take some produce bags and we're going to staple them to the inside of this wooden container, and that will keep it from rotting out prematurely along the bottom. And Stuart said, but doesn't that defeat the purpose because you just put holes in there for drainage? And I said, well, Stuart, we can poke holes in that plastic. And anyhow, his mom and I got a little chuckle out of that, partly because I was just talking about how I wasn't really very handy. So it's always nice to know that there's someone even less handy than you are around to make you feel better about yourself. So I am just stapling this, and you guys, I like to use these produce bags because they're just a little bit thinner and they're a little bit more malleable, so I'll be able to hide those around the edges. Okay, so that worked just brilliantly. And then, as I said, I'm going to make sure that I poke some holes in that plastic. Okay, so I did that. Now, I'm going to do at this point, let me make sure my holes are really through there, because I'm not going to want to turn this upside down once I get the soil in there. Okay. It isn't always pretty, but it works. Okay, so I've got that ready to go. Texans, are you ready? So now I'm going to fill this with some of this seed starting mix. Now the reason, there are just a number of reasons to use this seed starting mix, primarily because it's just a better medium for getting germination, for preventing fungal diseases like damping off. It's lighter, and it just works really, really well. Again, I have already pre-moistened this in the bag. And I can do this, you guys, for both short-term reasons and long-term reasons, kind of. So if I want to plant this as a box full of microgreens that I'm actually going to want to eat, then I'm going to be much more mindful of my selections of what I want to plant according to taste. But for me, I'm usually more visually inclined, and I'm doing it for how it will look as a display, especially since I am kind of hoping these will be ready. What's the date today? 7th. Is it the 7th or the 8th? Let me get my... It's the 6th. Okay, Susu tells me it's the 6th. So I'm doing this just under a month. So I will have really good germination and growth on these, because all of these things, I'm going to give you some germination tricks, but this will germinate very quickly, and I should have good density to the greens and the herbs that are growing in these boxes so that it will be beautiful at Easter time, because I think that's fun. So that's why I said Easter boxes. I've many a time planted living Easter baskets with greens and grasses and things. And this time I'm planting Easter boxes, which I think are going to be really cute, and I can't wait to show them to you after they have germinated and are done. Okay, so now depending on how you want this to look, because this is a perfect square, I thought it would be fun to do kind of a checkerboard 4-square thing. So what I'm going to do is this out of the way. Stuart, are you following me so far? Give me a nod, yes, with the phone. Okay. So what I like about this is that it is square and I can divide it just like my potager. This is like a mini potager. I can divide this into quadrants. So I now have 4 separate sections here that I'm going to plant 4 different kind of seeds in. So now let me look at my options. I've got baby leaf lettuce mix. I think this one I might do. Let me see here, Stuart, what do we have? Lettuce, dill. I think I'm going to do some dill and cilantro. Now I am aware, and I could look at the, I might do some basil. I could look at the seed packets, you guys, and see exactly how long it takes for things to germinate. I think that will be a pretty composition. What do you think, Stuart? Actually, I think this will be prettier. Okay, so according to just what I think will look visually appealing, in addition to tasty and useful as a garnish later on. But I just like the textural contrasts of all those things. So here, Stuart, let me put that up there one more time, and we'll try to do a screenshot this so you guys can see what selections I used. Okay, so in this quadrant, now by the way, you guys, outside, it is some of these are cool season germinators, but it is way still too cold outside to be doing any basil. But this one, I'm going to plant fairly densely. Rough up the soil just a little bit. And I could do something to probably ensure that all of these seeds were just really evenly planted. But I'm just going to kind of scatter them like this. And if they germinate and they're not exactly equal and germinated across this square, I can prick them out and replant them. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of tuck that in, and I have number 1 done. Oh, Stuart, you know what? I forgot something. I'll be right back. Always important, you guys, that I will make sure that I am identifying each seedling section. So I will later mark this one with basil, and I will make sure that I put also the planting date on it. I might even pencil on the expected days to germination. And I love the fact that these are wooden. Aren't those cute? And I think that will be really cute with my wooden box. Okay, so I've got those. Okay, so there's basil. Now I'm going to do my dill. Here, you guys, and I'll put a link below. These are my new favorite little multi-purpose tools. These are my little Bridgetown shears. I probably shouldn't be using them on paper, but they're handy. Okay, so now I'm going to do some dill. This is Tetra dill. Now, obviously, dill gets a lot taller than is going to be necessary for this box, but nevertheless, I'm going to get that delicate little ferny foliage And it's that texture that I really care about. Now, probably somebody's thinking, okay, you said this is kind of for short term, but long term, could you prick some of these seedlings out and plant them in the potager in the kitchen garden? Absolutely, I could. But right now, I want them to be planted just very, very densely. That is going to be fun. So, number 2 is dill. Fortunately, these seeds are big enough that I can identify them even without marking that quadrant. Okay, now my next one, moving on. I've got some cilantro here, you guys. And cilantro, I find, is one of those herbs that you develop a taste for. And I certainly have. I love it. Okay, so now in this quadrant, these are kind of roly-poly, kind of roll around. Plant some of these. Get back in there. And again, these are going to put on growth both in height and in width. So they should fill the square nicely. Okay, got that done. That was cilantro. And now I'm going to do this mesclun mix. Now, true microgreens, you harvest, almost very, very shortly after they germinate. But these, because I'm doing them a little bit for, I guess, aesthetic and display purposes rather than culinary purposes, I'm going to let them get a little bit taller than that before I harvest them, because I just want them to be pretty for longer. Okay. But if I wanted to harvest them as microgreens, I could when they were small, and the intensity of flavor would be really delicious. So it kind of just depends on what your objective is. How fun would this be to do with kids? And how fun for them to see these seedlings germinate. Okay, so there, I've got all of them. I'm not going to move this because I want to remember exactly what I put where. Now I'm going to take a little bit more potting medium to cover them. And these don't necessarily take light to germinate, you guys. So I'm going to tell you how I get them to germinate really, really quickly in the next step. But for right now, I'm just going to kind of cover these guys. I should have, I'm sure some of you are saying, Linda, you're so inefficient. Put that bag up on the table. But I kind of get in the zone, you guys, and I just work with what I've got going on. Okay, so there we go. Dill, mesclun, coriander, or cilantro, and what was this one, Stuart? Our very first one, do you remember? Basil. Okay. Okay, now, you're going to want to water them in, even though this is already pre-moistened. And you want to use something that's got a rosette on it. You don't want to, it's still a little bit messy, but it does the trick. You're not going to want to use a hose end sprayer. Probably one that was a little more delicate would have worked. Okay, so now I've got it planted up, you guys. So here is the next step, and this is just, this is one of these things that I learned over time. So I'm just a pretend gardener. I'm not a real gardener like a lot of you out there. So I don't have a lot of the accessories and things that real gardeners use. I don't have any warming mats. I don't have a greenhouse. I really don't have a place to store all of those things. So I just work with what I have. And what I do have is a stove. So the next step really is to bake some cookies. So what I do is I will put these on a cookie tray. I set them on top of my stove, where then I will be baking these cookies. Stuart, his eyes just lit up. Oh, she's going to be baking some cookies. And I'll put these on my stove, and what that does is provide bottom heat and ambient heat that will be perfect. They really like a temperature range which is indoors at about 65 to 75 degrees to germinate. But boy, I have found I have gotten lettuce to germinate in 2 days using this method. So what I'm going to do to ensure, let me come over here, Stuart, to ensure that they stay humid and that moisture is retained in there. So what I'll do is I will put in my markers, and then I'm going to cover them with plastic. And I just use whatever plastic bags I have. I could actually have a larger bag. I could put the entire box in there. I could cover it with bubble wrap or something. What I'm trying to do is just provide kind of a mini greenhouse effect so that these germinate as quickly as possible. Once they do, as soon as I see signs of germination, because I don't want them to overheat, I'm going to remove this, and then I'll put them outside in kind of a sunny, semi-shady area where they will grow outdoors. Now that is if the temperatures are moderate enough to be able to do that. And I would say I would feel pretty comfortable putting them out there, with the exception of the basil, but putting them out there probably when it was about 40 degrees, and easily we will have that in the next coming week. Now, after that, it may get cold again, in which case I will bring them in and just put them in a bright light. So that is the next step. Okay, for my next box, I've prepped it. This is the one from Garden Gate magazine that my little ornaments came in. And what I'm going to do here is create a mini lawn with this perennial ryegrass seed. And the reason I select this variety is because it germinates really, really quickly. And I almost can't put this on here thickly enough because I want it to be really dense, a really nice dense little lawn. Like a little fairy garden lawn. If you're into fairy gardening, this would be so cute to grow a box of this and let your little ones decorate it with little fairy creatures, with their toys, with their little toys. This would be just really a fun thing for them to do and see how it grows. And part of the fun is just watching it grow. I still get as excited over seeing a seed germinate now as I did the very first time I planted a seed. Okay, so I'm going to finish this up, you guys. So there you go, a very messy watering job. I obviously need a smaller watering can with a little better rosette at the end, but it works, and I kind of like making a mess on a warm, pretty day like today. So there you go. So I'm going to do the same thing with this. This one I'll probably just put into a plastic bag. Make sure to put the date on it so you'll know exactly when you started this. Then I'm going to pot up this last one, and hopefully next time I see you with this project, I will have all sorts of little germinated seedlings. Now what I'm going to do is, as they progress, I'll post updates in my Instagram stories. So if you're not already following me on Instagram stories, do that, and you can see how these are coming along and progressing day to day. I also might share what kind of cookies I decide to bake to bake. If you all were here, I would happily share them with you. So this is just a really fun and easy project, you guys. Gardening in a box, Easter box planting, whatever you call it. It's fun, it's satisfying, and it's a good project to do on a beautiful day.